Welcome to the Inspire to Invest podcast, where we're sharing stories from real estate investors and how investing has changed their lives. This episode of Inspire to Invest has been brought to you by Cardinal Law. Hey everybody, welcome to Inspire to Invest. I have Alan Lomax here with me from Steed Talker Capital. He's joining us all the way from North Carolina today, so welcome. Alan has experience with fix and flips, apartment rentals, spec home development, and mobile home parks, so he's very, very well diversified when it comes to real estate. And at the moment, he's also focusing on capital raising to empower others to find financial well-being and financial freedom through passive real estate investments. And he truly believes that it's never too late to find financial freedom and to live abundantly. So thank you so much for your time today. How are you?
I'm doing great, and it's so great to be with you today, Serena, and looking forward to the time with you today and your audience.
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously you do have a very diverse background when it comes to real estate. How did you get started in this field?
Well, it is an interesting story, and it starts, I think, way back in the seventh grade. And I am sitting in front of the television with my family, and on the screen comes this show, a special about homosexuality. And this is the first time I have heard the term homosexuality. And as I watch this and listen to this, all of the people being interviewed, their faces are smudged out and their identities are anonymous. And it hits me like a ton of rainbow bricks that these are the people that I am. And believe me, it was not rainbows and unicorns. It was more like Rocky's House of Horrors. And on top of that, I had dyslexia. And of course, it was undiagnosed at that time. It wasn't even a condition that was recognized. And so I was labeled a slow learner throughout my school days. And now comes the schoolyard bullying, and they assigned to me the nomenclature Susie. And so from this follows 2 decades of persistent depressive disorder. Somehow I graduate high school. I do go on to college. And my college career is as lackluster, and I'm as it was in high school, and I'm as directionless as a GPS with a dead battery. Somehow I managed to graduate. I get married, go from dead-end job to dead-end job. My wife having more awareness than I had ends the marriage. And this is some really dark days for me. I go into therapy, and it's like a light switch. One day I'm blind, the next day I really can see. I go back to school, get my master's in counseling, become a university counselor, attain my PhD, and really began to excel in life as a higher education leadership change agent. And while I'm doing that, I began to build my wealth through real estate investing.
Yeah.
All is well and fine until 2008 financial crisis hits.
Yeah.
And I lose absolutely everything. My job is gone. The identity I built upon that job and my wealth through real estate investing is gone.
Wow.
And in those very, very, very dark days, and they were very, very dark, all of those shame trips, those guilt trips, all of that hits me like a ton of brick. And during those days, I realized that I am still that seventh grade boy consumed with homophobic hatred and still feeling that intellectual inferiority complex. Well, through those times, I confront those core issues. 20 years after I first went into counseling, studied counseling myself, I finally go back to the very core. And I step out of the closet bigger than the Kardashians and rightly label my reading, writing, and math challenges as the dyslexia that it is rather than intellectual inferiority.
Mm-hmm.
And I embrace both my dyslexia and my fabulous gayness. And finally, worthy of self-acceptance and worthy of wealth, I really began to build passive income that and become the leader in education I always wanted to be,
Yeah.
and begin to really help others to flourish likewise.
Yeah.
And as far as those schoolyard bullies go, they can call me Susie all they want. It's a fine name.
Yeah.
And it's Saturday Night Live. And as I live abundantly and flourish, I get the last laugh. And
Yeah,
so,
that's amazing. I definitely wasn't expecting such a powerful story, but I think there's something to be said from that. I mentioned obviously before we hopped on that I was at a mastermind all weekend, and one of the quotes that one of the speakers shared was the struggles that you're facing today is building the strength that you need for tomorrow. So I think that's a good way to encapsulate your story just in terms of how you took those struggles and built upon them to be where you are today. And now obviously you're sharing that knowledge so that other people can kind of build themselves up. Now, when you think back to real estate, obviously you kind of lightly touched on building your portfolio at the same time that you were a professor. So how exactly did you get started? Like where did you focus on first? And then when 2008 happened, like, can you share a little bit more about what that portfolio looked like and really like how you came out of that?
well, prior to 2008, I was doing like a lot of people do. And I wouldn't recommend people starting this way, but it seems like a lot of people do. I was investing in single family homes and doing the fix up. And then I was generally holding for long term rentals, but I was also doing fix and flip at that point in time. And then I moved into small mobile home parks and was essentially kind of doing the same things with those, fixing them up and holding them for rentals. And uh, I think the reason that a lot of people do this, well, there's a lot of glamour around this. HGTV really glamorizes this purchase of
Yeah.
single family homes, fix and flip, and so on and so
Yeah.
forth.
And you can do it in
Well,
no time.
you can do it at no time, and it's so much fun, and it's so
Yeah.
much glamour to it.
Yeah.
Well, there's two things about it. It's high risk, and it's not scalable. Particularly if you are a full-time professional or entrepreneur, do
Yeah.
you really want a second job? Because that's what that really is, and it was for
Yeah.
me.
Yeah.
And
That's
and
extremely
to
active. So
extra
don't take
ex,
that on if you don't have the time.
exactly. And so 2008 hit and lost everything. I had a lot of time to think about
Yeah.
what I was doing and what I really wanted to do. And I realized that it was a lot of work and I still wanted to be engaged in education. And I did become employed again in that field
Yeah.
and had a passion for it, still have a passion for it and love it. And I wanted to devote my time to that. So I'm going, well, how can I do this
Yeah.
and increase my wealth through real estate investing? And so I've found commercial real estate to be the way that you can invest passively and you can also scale it at the same time that you're
Yeah.
investing passively.
Now, can you talk
And
a little bit more about that? Because I think when people hear the word commercial real estate, they may th think of something like industrial or warehousing. I'm assuming that you might be alluding to multifamily, but maybe you can talk a little bit about, how you discovered that and why you find that to be so beneficial as an investor.
well, primarily, yes, that is what we do is invest in multifamily uh, because, well, the reason we're doing it is there's an enormous housing shortage in the United States and people need housing. And so
Yeah.
there's always going to be a demand for multifamily housing. It's also a field, the housing aspect of it was what I was comfortable with as investing in single family homes. I know how to deal with tenants and toilets and trash, though I don't want to deal with that, and so that's why I deal with it passively.
Yeah.
But I the important thing if you are going to invest passively is you need to know the sponsors, and so that's what I have taken the time, effort, and energy to do. I have a podcast. I have interviewed over 650 successful investors in the field. And so I have built this huge portfolio of successful investors so that I can go to them with the capital, not only my own capital, but the capital that I raise and invest with those who are doing the active part of it.
Yeah.
And active part of commercial real estate investing, yes, it's extraordinarily active. From acquisition to deal negotiations to property management to asset management to taking these properties from uh, crack houses to communities where children can play in the playgrounds unsupervised is a major challenge and a major task. And
Yeah.
you need to have a team who's experienced and know exactly what they're doing in order
Yeah.
to take those from trash to mansion.
Now,
And
just in terms of where you're investing, so I know in the States, it just seems like, people tend to cross state lines and invest all over, maybe a little bit more so than I see potentially here in Canada. So can you talk about where those properties are and, if there's a sweet spot for you just in terms of number of units or locations based on landlord laws or affordability?
well, a lot of our investments are in the southeast because of three reasons. What we look for in indicators um, are population growth, income growth, and employment opportunity growth.
Okay.
So those are the three factors. And so that's why we can cross state lines, and we do, and we have invested in Texas and Pennsylvania, and and right now there's really a lot of opportunity in the Midwest, although we haven't yet invested there. But
Yeah.
In the Kansas City area, and Missouri areas, it's growing really dramatically.
Yeah.
So there's spots all over the place that we look at those three indicators of uh, income growth, population growth, and employment growth.
Yeah.
And those are, if those things are going on there, then those are good communities to invest in.
Yeah.
Generally speaking, we're investing in communities of 200,000 or more.
Yeah.
And you'd ask about the unit size. We typically are looking for units of 50 units or more. And the sweet spot is really 50 to about 150.
Yeah.
Though we go outside those parameters if the numbers are working correctly.
Now, I know that the price point would probably vary a little bit depending on the locations, but what would you say the average price point for like a 50 unit would be compared to, say, a 150 unit?
The price points seem to be around the 50 units, somewhere around the 2 to 3 to 4 million dollars, depending upon the property itself and, of
Yeah.
course, its location.
Yeah.
And the 150 units are anywhere from 10 to 12 to 15 million or so. And of course, I mean, we do extensive underwriting,
Yeah.
and even though it may be in a community with all three of those factors that are working for it, it may on the surface look like a very good value add. The underwriting is what is going to determine whether or not we're going to go into this. And
Yeah.
we make tons of offers each and every year. 99% of them are not accepted
Yeah.
because we stick to our numbers and we do not go into a deal until we know that we can make the projected numbers that we are looking for.
Yeah. No, that makes perfect sense. Now, when you look back at your portfolio or even potentially your career, what would you say is something that you're most proud of or something that you think is your most successful investment?
Well, it was a Murfreesboro property. There were It was basically a well-maintained property, but the owner of it, the owner had built it. He had owned it for something like 20, 22 years or so and had
Hmm.
managed it himself.
Yeah.
And since he knew the property, he had a good maintenance team, and so he was taking care of it. But he was doing weekly rentals on these properties, and that's what was attracting all of these uh, drug dealers and crackheads, uh, and and there was no particular reason for that, because this particular property was in a very good neighborhood. All of the properties surrounding that were were you know nice middle class properties, and there
Yeah.
was a university not far from it. Workforce was excellent, and so there really was no reason to be running this property like that. But for whatever reason, that's how he chose to run it.
Yeah.
So the reason it was so successful is because, of course, we got it at a very good price, and we were able to go into this property, and with just changing the management, we were able to convert this community from a, a drug community to a community where children were playing in the playgrounds
Yeah.
unsupervised, and we were able to do that in a 3-month period.
Yeah.
That's astronomical to turn that kind of property around in that short a period of time. But it was because it was in a good neighborhood.
Yeah.
It was a well maintained properly, at least physically. We did some work to upgrade the exteriors. We put some gazebos and grilling things. We upgraded the playgrounds and what have you, but
Yeah.
the apartments themselves were in pretty good shape.
Yeah, and I love that you're
So,
talking on that. I mean, here in Toronto, they just actually passed a bylaw last week, and they're calling it the rent eviction bylaw. And,
uh-huh.
I think that we're in a more of a tenant-friendly province, which can be challenging for landlords and investors. And I think sometimes they get a bad rap. They're kicking people out on the premise of renovating to improve the value and raise the rents. And yes, of course, that is part of the goal, but you have to also keep in mind that this is literally cleaning up communities and improving things for a reason. So it's not necessarily just about the bottom line and this selfish desire to kind of increase the value in that sense. I think you just shine a light on a really important point, which is you're actually making such a good increase in terms of turning it into maybe a disheveled or distressed building and surroundings to something where families can live and feel safe and things like that. So I think that's very important. But on that note, we're going to take a really brief break for a word from our sponsors, and we'll be right back.
We're investors. We understand investors. I've invested in real estate longer than I've been a lawyer. We help with transactions, but we're not transactional. We approach things from what's the strategy and how this helps clients. They're not sort of dealing with a hodgepodge of corporations and assets and trying to mix it all together in some form of mixing bowl. We work in a collaborative way with our clients to create some form of organized structure and reduce the chaos, take a less is more approach, and we find people are really happy with that.
For more, go to cardinallaw.ca. Thanks again for following along with this episode of Inspired to Invest. In addition to real estate, investing, and running my own brand experience agency for 18 years, I also published a book called The Accidental Entrepreneur in October of 2021. This is my story, and it chronicles how I turned tragedy into triumph to embrace my destiny in entrepreneurship. If you're interested in picking up a copy, you can find the link at serenahomesrealtor.com, and you can also find my link tree with all of the retailers in the details below. Thanks again for your support. Is the real estate investment you're considering a gold mine or a landmine? Introducing PropertyCast.io, the black magic of real estate investment analysis. Use PropertyCast.io to analyze and underwrite real estate investment opportunities, unlock the potential of a property, and share professional reports. Jordan McGregor is a commercial realtor and founder of PropertyCast.io. He identified the need to simplify and streamline how properties are underwritten to help investors make better decisions and sound investments. PropertyCast.io is a best-in-class purpose-built tool for real estate investment analysis. To find out more, go to PropertyCast.io, and to sign up, click the link in the show notes. Inspired to Invest is proud to support the Beyond Success program. In today's complex world, it's absolutely crucial for our youth to learn how to take charge of their financial future. We believe that every young person deserves access to accurate, practical financial information. Designed to bridge the gap, the Beyond Success program leverages a comprehensive educational bootcamp to equip young minds with essential financial literacy skills. At Beyond Success, it's not just about teaching financial literacy, it's also about fostering a foundation for a prosperous and empowered future. Join us. Together we can build a brighter financial future for the next generations. Join us. Together we can build a brighter financial future for the next generations. Hey everybody, welcome back to Inspire to Invest. I have Alan Lomax joining me today from Steve Tucker Capital in North Carolina. And before the break, we were talking about how he got into real estate investing and how he's now transitioned so he can offer some passive real estate investments to people so that they can find financial independence and freedom. And I guess one of the things that I want to know is what would you say is one of the craziest things that's happened to you as a real estate investor so far?
One of the craziest things. Well, I just go back to 2008. That really, truly was the most craziest thing that had happened to me. It was out of the blue. I didn't see 2008 coming, but it came like a tidal wave. I wasn't the only one who suffered from that.
Yeah.
But it certainly has sharpened my perspective on not only being aware of what I'm doing as an investor, but being aware of the larger economy and world events, and really staying on top of that. And so I don't ever want to be caught off guard like that ever again. But then also not only am I staying on top of those kinds of things, but I never put myself in the vulnerable position that I was in prior to 2008, which was essentially I was over leveraged to the max. I mean, there are gurus out there that say, we use leverage. Leverage is an important part of real estate investing.
Yeah.
But we use it wisely and we use it conservatively. There's so many gurus out there that say just, leverage to the max. And that's fine as long as economies are going up, but economies are always going to crash.
Yeah.
And in our underwriting, we are prepared for the crash, and we leverage planning for the crash, whether it comes or not. We are ready for it.
Yeah. I think that's really important. And, obviously there's different real estate cycles. I think right now we're in one of those circumstances, and it's not maybe the crash the way that 2008 was defined, but I feel like a lot of investors that are at least in my network are experiencing that right now because they did go in using other people's money and potentially in some cases raised debt instead of equity. So it's not sustainable. Now they're experiencing big drops in their portfolio values and things like that. They can't pull out the equity on a refi that they had expected. And then now there's these circumstances where they are letting down their passive investors and, and in some instances, even going into insolvency proceedings and receiverships and things like that. And it is, damaging to them, but it's devastating to their passive investors. It could be losing their principals. And in some cases, it could be their retirement savings and things like that. So I think it's something that you have to be very mindful of when you are an active investor, that you have to be a steward and be extremely responsible for the money that you are bringing in. And you have to try to, just always plan for the worst case scenario and multiple exit strategies, just so that you are taking care of your investors and your portfolio.
Absolutely. And yes, you're right. There are numerous capital calls going on because, like you said, people were relying upon debt rather than equity. And that is essentially what I was doing, is over leveraging. And when things turn down, if you're over leveraged, you're caught between a rock and a hard place, and you're going to hurt yourself. And if you have investors in there, you're going to hurt your investors.
Yeah, for sure. Now, in terms of educating yourself as a real estate investor, what would you say is some of the best advice that you've received over the years?
Get a coach, join a mastermind, and build your network. And it took me a long time to do all three of those, but those are critical.
Yeah, get where you want to go faster. Hopefully with less mistakes. What would you say is one of the biggest lessons? I know you talked about not being over leveraged, but is there anything else that comes to mind when you think about, just a really pivotal lesson that really transformed your business or your trajectory?
Well, in building your network, it's important to have a broad and wide network, because there are real estate investors out there, and then there are other real estate investors. And I want to work with the real estate investors who have have solid values. They live those values. Those values are part of their work life, their personal life, and they have a stellar track record. Uh, and uh, and so you're not going to find those just willy-nilly.
Yeah.
And there's lots of investors out there. There's a few who have all of those qualities that I'm looking for. So did that answer your question?
Yeah, no, I think
Okay.
so. And I guess just to dive into that a little bit deeper. So there have been some people I've talked to in the last little while that talked about, how their active investors or their working partners were not necessarily who they expected to be, and maybe they overstated their experience or something like that. So I wanted to know what kind of due diligence that you would put into, if you're looking to find a GP to partner with and someone that will be that working partner when it comes to acquisition and management and things like that, just so that you don't find yourself in a circumstance where you are a partner to somebody that doesn't know what they're doing.
Well, my due diligence really comes from conversations with these people and long-term relationships. It's not, I don't go into a partnership with anybody I just met yesterday.
Yeah.
These are long-term relationships that I have been developing over the course of years, and I stay away from new investors. I would like to help new investors out, but it's not just my money that I'm putting into these deals. I'm bringing other investors to this.
Yeah.
And so I want to know that I am working with a stellar team who has that track record, and it's easy to look at their track record and see what it is that they have or have not been doing.
Yeah.
It's not as easy to know who they are as individuals. The only way you know that is to know them and have an ongoing relationship with them.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that makes sense. Now in terms of your portfolio, what would you say is next for you? Like, do you think you've reached your financial freedom goal, or is there something that you're still aspiring to achieving?
Well, I am still aspiring to grow and develop. I plan to add another 1,000 units to my portfolio within this next year, and and have been working on this for many, many years. But I plan to this year. The plan is to really establish the foundation that really is the namesake of my business, Detox Capital, which is a foundation that will support the education and development of an understanding of the equine experience from the equine themselves, rather than what the traditional horsemanship experiences have taught us over the centuries.
Yeah.
So it's a big undertaking, but that's where we're moving
Okay.
within this coming year.
Awesome. Now, when you look back, obviously this has been quite the journey for you. How would you say real estate investing has changed your life?
Well, as an educator, and certainly even prior to actually going into higher education, I was really it was 38 years before I went back for I was 38 years old when I went back for my master's degree. So for my first 14, 15 years as an adult, uh, I was just going from job to job to job, living in poverty and just living from paycheck to paycheck. And going into higher education, certainly that's not the highest paid profession in the world. And so going into real estate and really actually looking at money and wealth from a totally and completely different perspective
Yeah.
than I do as a higher education employee. It's a totally different mindset, and it has taken me on a totally and completely different journey than it would have had I stayed in higher education. just many more. With wealth comes opportunities. And so there's just so many more opportunities to empower myself and to empower others that would never have come my way without that.
Yeah, no, I love that. So obviously the name of this podcast is Inspired to Invest. So I always like to ask my guests, what's a particular quote that motivates or inspires them?
Well, it is the quote that some people see life as it is and ask why. I see things as they are and ask why not. So that's my favorite quote.
I love that. Yeah, one of my favorites is we rise by lifting others. So I think that's something that's aligned with what you do in terms of sharing opportunities and giving people that chance to reap the benefits of real estate investing the way that you do. For anyone that wants to connect to understand the opportunity that you may have available, what's the best way for them to reach you?
Well, the best way to do this is, and I have a free gift for your audience today. I develop relationships with professionals who desire to passionately engage in their calling, and I empower them to create multiple streams of passive income so that, free of financial anxiety, they can make significant impacts that they really actually dream of making. And I have created a system, just like I've been talking about, that moves professionals from exchanging their time and money to financial independence and to multiple streams of income where they could spend more time with friends, family, and have an abundant lifestyle and really passionately engage in the work of their calling to make the dynamic impacts that they desire to make for humanity and the planet.
Yeah.
So what I offer your audience is I offer a strategic consultation. It's valued at $499. Your viewers and listeners can get a complimentary strategic session. It lasts about an hour to an hour and a half. And during that session, we'll clarify their vision, their values, what it is that is significant to them, and what meaningful impact is it that they really want to make. And we'll talk about what are the obstacles that are preventing them from making that impact. And if they're interested, I'll share with them the blueprint to move them from exchanging their time and money to financial independence.
Great.
And it's, like I said, it's complimentary, and we'll find out if our visions align, which my vision is empowering professionals to engage in their calling and make the galactic impact they dream of making. And if those visions align, then maybe we can work together. And if there's a match there, that's great and wonderful. If there isn't, there's no big deal. We've just made friends with one another, and maybe they can refer me to another individual, or maybe they'll get back to me at a later date. So they can find that at Steed Talker, the name of my company, Steed the horse, Talker like I'm doing now, steedtalker.com/strategy. And they can schedule a time for a strategy call.
Perfect. So we'll include all of that in the show notes below. Of course, thank you for taking time out of your schedule to be here today. And for anyone that is watching, of course, thank you for your time. If you've enjoyed this episode, make sure that you like, follow, and subscribe. And make sure you're also following along on social media at Inspired to Invest. And remember, when you invest in yourself, the sky's the limit. Thanks again. Thanks again to Cardinal Law for bringing you this episode of Inspired to Invest. The views represented on this podcast are for general information only and does not constitute investment or other professional advice or an offering of securities. The host and guests featured on Inspired to Invest make no representations as to the performance of any particular investment. Should you decide to make an investment, you are responsible for conducting your own review and analysis. It is recommended that you obtain independent legal, accounting, and tax advice from licensed professionals.